I think you'll see that my guest today is an amazing person, an amazing woman, a very powerful, young, passionate advocate for dual-use, multi-use solar in North America. Alexis Pascaris is her name. She's the founding director of a little organization called Agrisolar Consulting, and she is a catalyst for the maturation of dual-use solar. This includes agrivoltaics and pollinator-friendly solar and growing honey on solar fields. There's many ways we can make dual uses out of solar farms. They don't have to be a monocrop of grass, right? And this is good for our industry. It's going to help us be more accepted by neighbors, and we're going to reduce pushback against community and utility solar, which is a real thing and a real problem in some parts of the U.S. already. It's very early days in the energy transition, and we can't afford any more friction than we already have on the permitting and local acceptance of renewable energy. Alexis has a master's degree in agrisolar, and so she's the first generation of these super knowledgeable and collaborative individuals who is spearheading novel research and development. She's developing a software platform called Spade in conjunction with a solar company in Colorado called Sandbox Solar and several academic institutions, including the University of Arizona. And this is just a really wonderful thing to make it easier for solar developers to go from saying, hey, we would love to do specialty cropping on this land once we develop a solar farm here, to actually knowing what types of equipment you want to install, what types of crops are going to work in that geography, what are the challenges that you should anticipate, and so forth and so on. So with that, I give you Alexis Pascaris. Today on the Clean Power Hour, we're going to geek out on agrisolar and agrivoltaics, a topic that is near and dear to my heart. My guest today is Alexis Pascaris. She is the founding director of Agrisolar Consulting. Welcome to the Clean Power Hour, Alexis.
Thanks so much, Tim. It's an honor to be here with you.
I was so thrilled to meet you at SPI this past summer, now known as RE+. And it's very heady days, not just for the solar industry, but for agrisolar and agrivoltaics, because it really is all the rage. The majority of solar professionals would prefer that their projects be dual use in some way. They recognize, or we recognize, that it's good for landowners, it's good for farming communities, it's good for the land, et cetera, et cetera. There's so many goods when you can have dual use solar, and we're talking about grazing, growing crops, and other agricultural uses like apiaries, right? Growing bees and honey on solar farms. So tell our listeners a little bit about yourself, how you got interested in clean energy and in agrisolar specifically.
Great. Thanks, Tim. My journey goes back a little bit. As a young, impassioned environmentalist, I was angry as a teenager, angry about deforestation and pollution. I was interested in land conservation, natural resource management, and just thinking about how we can have a better, more healthy relationship with our world. So that really prompted me to pursue higher education in environmental sustainability. So I earned my undergraduate degree from Michigan State University in 2018 in environmental sustainability with a focus in economics. And while I was there, I got the opportunity to study abroad in Australia, and I did a capstone on alternative energy. I spent a month traveling around, and studying how farms and other food production facilities were integrating alternative energy into their operations. And that really stuck with me. It was cool. But I wanted to keep learning. It wasn't enough. And my boyfriend at the time, who's actually now my husband, really pushed me to pursue graduate school. And I found a program that resonated with me in a place that I love, Michigan's Upper Peninsula. So I went on and I earned my Master's of Science in Environmental and Energy Policy in 2021 from Michigan Tech. And while I was there, I met the right people at the right time. Dr. Joshua Pierce, Dr. Chelsea Shelley had earned a grant from the Department of Energy CETO office to study agrivoltaics. And they offered me the position and it just fit. It clicked so well. I got to unite my land conservation passions with alternative energy pursuits. And I went for it. I hit the ground running really hard. My thesis was titled The Social Dimensions of a Technological Innovation, Agrivoltaics in the U.S. So at a high level, I just really wanted to make the greatest amount of impact in the shortest amount of time. So that means I had to work in opposition to the fossil fuel industry and smooth the runway for the greater deployment of solar and renewables. So I found myself coming from an angry space to a space of action where I am now.
Very cool. Yeah, you're probably the first generation of professionals with degrees in agrivoltaics, and that's awesome. And you're based there in the Keweenaw Peninsula, the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. Well, a subset of the Upper Peninsula, a place that is near and dear to my heart, where I've been going for the last 20 years to ski in the winter and to camp in the summer. Just lovely nature. It's on the shores of Lake Superior, but not necessarily at the epicenter of the solar industry, certainly. So when you look at the landscape, though, nationally here in the U.S. around Agrisolar, well, first, I guess we should tease apart Agrisolar from agrivoltaics. Agrivoltaics is a much more common expression, and then we also have pollinator-friendly solar. But how do you differentiate, I guess, Agrisolar and agrivoltaics?
Yeah, great question. It's a hot question too because it has implications on policymaking. Actually, how you define things. I see Agrisolar as kind of like the overarching umbrella that is inclusive of all forms of co-location or integration of solar on agricultural landscapes. So maybe that's a rooftop solar on a barn, or maybe that's solar on a marginal field that's not in production. So Agrisolar is this big umbrella that can include pollinator-friendly habitat and apiaries. When you use the word agrivoltaics, my mind thinks more like discrete food production underneath and within the rows of the solar panels. So a very symbiotic and intentional relationship when talking about agrivoltaics.
Gotcha.
Is that helpful?
Yeah, definitely. And we've had the American Solar Grazing Association, ASGA, on the show a couple of times. That's a fast-growing segment of agrivoltaics, where you're grazing sheep, primarily sheep. You can graze cattle also. It's just you have to use different construction methods and more robust construction to protect the array from the cattle, which are potentially a hazard. But anyway, in general, dual-use solar is a wonderful thing. And I mean, a worst case, we're taking cropland or subprime farmland or forested land and turning it into an energy project to help us clean the grid. And I have absolutely no qualms about converting industrial farmland. This is in the Midwest, corn and beans, right? 90% of Illinois was tallgrass prairie prior to European settlement. Now it is corn and beans. It's wonderful farmland. It's some of the most productive farmland in the world. But let's face it, there are a lot of chemical inputs to that type of farming. It's very heavy on the land. It's very heavy on the Mississippi and the Gulf of Mexico, where we have all this nutrients running off the land, nutrients and pesticides, right? And so when you are able to then take some of that land and put it into solar and do pollinator friendly or honey or grazing or cropping, and we're going to talk a little more about that. It's just it's a nice way to mix it up, and it's much lighter on the land, right? In theory, doesn't have to be. You could do heavy input farming on a solar farm too. So we can't generalize too much. But what is Agrisolar Consulting, and what is your mission?
Agrisolar Consulting is my platform. Post-graduation, I exited academia really sharp and excited, and kind of fell flat on my face because there wasn't a job for me. There wasn't a place for me to really apply all the knowledge that I generated studying the diffusion of agrivoltaics. Like, where can I go? There was no solar company at the time looking for a delegate to deploy this mission. So I just created it myself. I launched in 2021, July. And so I'll step back and say that I'm a social scientist and a policy specialist. So I apply that lens to the emerging agrivoltaic industry. So at a high level, I'm using stakeholder engagement to inform policy and practices for agrivoltaics. So I use my research to remove barriers to development. And that looks different every day. Like, I have the great fortune of working with a wide range of public and private partners on agrivoltaic research and development through Agrisolar Consulting. So, for example, I've partnered with the American Farmland Trust to understand the potential for policy innovation for agrivoltaics in the Northeast. So we're focused on the state of Connecticut. That's one of many states under the jurisdiction of AFT's efforts. We convened an advisory committee that has representation from Connecticut Farm Bureau, Working Lands Alliance, Yukon Extension. We get all these wonderful people in the room, and they helped us develop and deploy a survey. So we're asking farmers and solar developers about their interests and concerns when it comes to solar on farmland. So then we synthesize those insights, we develop recommendations, and we take those recommendations to regulators. So how we level and smooth the runway for agrivoltaics to be developed is by elevating stakeholder concerns. That's like one small portion of the work I do here. I can go on and on. I'm not sure how much you want to know.
Yeah, I guess I would love to learn more about how you attack the problem per se. We have, on the one hand, we have industry, we have the solar developers and that community. Then we have landowners and farmers and ranchers, and then there's this policy and authorities having jurisdiction perspectives on things. In some places like New Jersey, they have, my understanding is, banned solar development on ag land because, okay, New Jersey is a small state. It's very dense. So ag land is already a very precious resource, and they don't want to see their remaining ag land go to community solar or utility solar. And I get that. But it probably is a both and, right? We probably can do appropriate agriculture on that land and solar farming and make it a win-win. One of the cool things about solar is that it is great for the landowners. Here in the Midwest, a landowner can triple their income by leasing their land to a solar developer. We're only going to convert a fraction of the landscape. We're talking 1% to 2% nationally is all we need to completely green the grid. And so, first and foremost, communities don't need to, worry that, hey, we're going to pave over the breadbasket. There's going to be plenty of land. We're super rich in land. It just depends on the jurisdiction. Like I mentioned, in New Jersey, they're not super rich in land. It's a very small, dense state. So you need to find a locally appropriate approach. And today that is, okay, they're just putting their hand up saying, okay, no solar on ag land. Maybe tomorrow, though. And it's a dynamic landscape, though. So how do you see the bigger landscape here in the U.S.? What are some hot spots? You mentioned Connecticut, which is, I would imagine, in a similar boat to New Jersey. It also is quite dense and relatively small in the greater scheme of things, bigger than New Jersey, maybe. But yeah, paint a picture for us.
Yeah, great questions. You kind of highlighted it, like it's not yes or no to solar on farmland. It's how. How are we going to do it right? And we got to be proactive and strategic about that. So we make sure that the solar is leveraged to benefit the farmer and support farm viability. So thinking about the landscape, I see great pockets of innovation up in the Northeast, and I associate that with they have some market mechanisms that are really stimulating innovation on the solar industry side. So when I think about barriers and opportunities for agrivoltaics across the landscape, I kind of compartmentalize my perspective. So I'll say like barriers for developers or barriers for farmers or for regulators. It's so complex. But when I think about solar industry adoption of agrivoltaics, there's this liability of newness that's halting. Like what I mean by that is developers want proof of concept. I get asked all the time, like, is this cultivar going to thrive underneath this solar configuration? It's like, that's a great question. And we have researchers working on that. But your learning curve shouldn't stop. This learning curve shouldn't stop innovation. But it is, because it's creating this techno-economic barrier. Like, I don't know how to design the system to accommodate whatever's being cropped in this area. And I don't know what that means for my bottom line. I can't calculate financial return. How am I going to get this? This isn't financeable. It's upper management is not going to put a stamp on it. So this liability of newness is having a ripple effect on techno-economic feasibility. And then that trickles to political feasibility. When you go to get solar on farmland permitted, well, whose problem is that? Is that the Department of Environmental Protection? Is that the Department of Agriculture? Should they be speaking to each other? Who has to write my permits? So the developers I've spoken to dozens and dozens of companies across different regions, different scales of operation, and they say this lack of cohesive view on agrivoltaics is a huge roadblock, and it's just creating more time. It translates to more soft costs, and some are just saying like it's too much, it's too complex right now. But on the flip side, there's all these motivators or drivers that are pushing innovation, like you opened, like talking about that observability of benefits, like wow, the potential for ecosystem services. I can leverage that to win better projects and deliver more benefits to communities. Developers care about that. They care about PR. They care about long-term reputation, and so they're being pushed by public pressure to innovate. And we're seeing that market mechanisms really matter. Like I said, the pockets of innovation, especially in Massachusetts, they have a feed-in tariff that's offering 6 cents per kilowatt hour of agrivoltaics. Yeah, that's the language of developers. They move to make that happen. And so it's taking root across the country, but it's being slowed by these knowledge gaps and socio-political barriers, which is part of my mission, is like why I'm pressing so hard and yelling so loudly about market mechanisms and information sharing and cross-sector partnerships. Like, to gain traction, we need to work across barriers. And there's a whole toolkit of policy mechanisms that we have. And I can talk more in depth about that. But at the end of the day, we're at this point, and I look back and I love to study like socio-technical transitions and the diffusion of innovations. I totally geek out about that stuff and applying it to agrivoltaics. We're at a point where we're really trying to make it real and functional and cost effective. And that's how we're going to smooth the runway.
So I'm glad you mentioned this program in Massachusetts. I was not aware that there was a feed-in tariff incentivizing agrivoltaics. That is absolutely the thing that will get developers' attention. And, you know, we also have pollinator checklists, and those are a very good thing. They make it tangible and relatively easy for developers to apply something that's relatively ecologically sound and vetted by ecologists and other biologists. But let's talk about who your customers are. There's many needs in the world, but who do you target? And let's talk a little more about what exactly you're doing for them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great question because I've been playing bumper carts, like trying to figure out what my boundaries are, what my service is. So I just celebrated a year recently, and I haven't been advertising myself. It's more been word of mouth and drawing upon existing networks and relationships, which has been so beautiful and fruitful. But I've seen an uptick probably the last 6 months of inquiries from solar developers. So beyond my research efforts with Dr. Greg Barron Gafford and Dr. Andrea Gerlach at University of Arizona, I've got this full research portfolio, but now developers are knocking on the door. So I've pivoted and I'm starting to take my expert knowledge into the common domain and really taking my research findings and helping developers. So what that looks like, I can't do it alone. So I've partnered with Sandbox Solar, which is a developer based out of Fort Collins, Colorado, who has experience in agrivoltaic research and development. So Ian Score, the founder of Sandbox Solar, and Thomas Hickey, who's a horticulturalist leading agrivoltaic research at Colorado State University, we've come together to develop a software tool, and we've branded that software tool Spade. So Spade is like a fully functioning parametric software with a front-facing web interface, and it allows us to do a holistic design and analysis of an agrivoltaic system. That's fine and dandy. We have outputs of PV energy. We know what the ground level irradiance looks like. That informs the suitable crops for that site, and it is integrated with NREL's SAM tool. So we have this economic crop-based tool, and we use that to answer developers' questions. So they'll come to us. Ranging from, I have a discrete project, a discrete location, we want to integrate it with crops, to I'm interested in agrivoltaics, but I don't know where to start. And we field those inquiries and we triangulate all of our expertise. So I walk them through the stakeholder engagement process and who needs to be at the table and how to engage farmers properly and integrate their concerns. Thomas is the mastermind in the modeling, and he's a horticulturalist, so he understands implications on crop production. Ian has an awesome skill set too. So we come together to help developers move from like this concept to construction. And it's so exciting to see the research turn into application and actual megawatts of agrivoltaics deployed. It's a dream come true for sure. So that's like how we're answering questions that are coming in, using the software, using our experience. And at the end of the day, we want to turn this software into a software as a service. So it's not just us. We want to have imagine if every developer had access to this and they can answer their own questions and get moving faster on agrivoltaics.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for listening to the Clean Power Hour or viewing it on YouTube. We do have a great YouTube channel. If you're not subscribed, please go to cleanpower.group and hit that YouTube icon and subscribe to our channel. Of course, you can find all of our content on your favorite audio platform as well. So please give us a rating and review. Back to the show. That's awesome. I look forward to learning more about Spade, and we've had Jack's on the show, Jack's Solar Garden. Google that. He's a farmer who is interested in solar and has gotten involved with some academic organizations. He's based in Colorado, which seems to be a hot spot. Now you have Sandbox there. The University of Arizona is obviously a thought leader in this arena as well. We should mention the Agrisolar Clearinghouse, which is a program funded by the Department of Energy at the end of the day, I believe. And,
yes, it is.
We'll be bringing them on the show here in the coming months. One of our challenges is that the U.S. is so big and there's so many climate regions and different soil types. And, just in Illinois, you see several different climate zones. We're a long and skinny state, 6 hours tip to toe by car. And in the north, we have north and central part of the state, we have corn and bean farming, very, very fertile corn and bean farming. And then in the southern part, it's hillier and there's less fertile soil, and that's more rangeland. So we're growing cattle and horses. And so, of course, it will differ how you approach an agrisolar or agrivoltaics project in different regions. And one of the things is that farmers are smart people and they have to eke out a living. And so they're going to gravitate to products and practices that make good economic sense for them. There's a reason we're not using our best farmland to grow broccoli, for example, generally speaking. We're growing corn and beans. We're growing these cash crops that are heavily subsidized, but nonetheless produce better income for the farmer. And that's, money talks. It's not easy to be a farmer, but it can be very lucrative. And now we have this option for farmers to be solar farmers. It's, I know I'm a little bit of a broken record on this front, but it is good for landowners because rural communities are struggling to keep the next generation on the land. Young people want to go to the city where the action is, where the jobs are, where the economic opportunities are. And so there is this just huge gravitational force pulling people out of rural America. And that's a problem in so many ways. So there is a lifeline here, I think, with clean energy and agrivoltaics. And we need more credible information from people like you about how do I get from A to Z, right? It's one thing to say, oh yeah, we're going to do agrisolar here. No questions asked. Okay, well, devil's in the details. What crops are viable under single axis tracker solar arrays, for example? And so let's talk about some of those nitty gritties, like what crops are viable in the greater spectrum. And you could talk specifically about certain regions. But what are you seeing out there that, you think has legs, so to speak?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The $1 million question. What's going to grow underneath my solar panel? Well, pointing to the seminal research happening down at the University of Arizona, when we're speaking about drought impacted regions, we've seen I think it's a threefold increase in yields of chilean peppers and certain tomato cultivars. And that's interesting and great. And that's applicable for their region. And then we start to branch out a little bit more, semi-arid region like Colorado. We're seeing great responsiveness of pasture grasses happening at Jack's Solar Garden. And other research done by Thomas Hickey at Colorado State University is showing different impacts, not just on we're talking about crop yield, but we're talking about soil temperature, and that matters in the long term. So soil temperatures decrease underneath the panels, and that has implications on water demands of plants. So there's so many technical benefits that go beyond just the yield of the crop. So we're talking about specialty crops predominantly. I have yet to really see commodity crops done in a pilot test study underneath panels. But if we move up to the Northeast, the University of Vermont did a study on saffron. And if you look at the price point of saffron, it's just enormously lucrative. I encourage you to go take a look at that study, how saffron not only performed technically or agronomically, but economically. So that's a really interesting specialty crop application. That was kind of a really general overlay of the land in the U.S. There are more applications with viticulture in Europe. They are looking at wheat and higher growing commodity crops. But I will say the U.S. is a little limited. We're a little bit behind in terms of greater deployment of pilot test studies in every single region. I want every single state to test their top 3 agricultural products underneath panels. Let's go. Why are we waiting around for this proof of concept? It's great when things work down in Arizona, but what's going to work here in Michigan? We need researchers on that right away. So I think that is that feedback loop between research and development, this R&D feedback loop. Developers are hesitant until we see that data. So that is the $1 million question. What's going to work? We have a few awesome case studies, but we need more of them. So I want to be able to speak more intelligently to that question in the near future. And I hope my answer isn't disappointing to some waiting to say broccoli is going to grow twice as big underneath solar panels. I'd love to say that, but we need more research.
And let's talk a little more about spade, I guess. If I'm a developer and let's say I am looking at, some thousands of acres. I mean, big solar projects are now above 10,000 acres in the U.S. And granted, historically, most of that has been on relatively xeric land out west, but it is coming to the breadbasket. There's a 13,000 acre project in Indiana called Mammoth Solar. And, but if I'm a developer, how hard is it to use spade, and do I have to hire you to do that, or how does that work, and what will I learn?
So right now, Spade is in a beta version. So it has a front-facing web interface, but it's limited in functionality to what we have on the back end. And that's just where we are in development. We started a year ago. We've been really scrappy using Department of Energy funds to make our way to where we are now. So right now, the tool doesn't satisfy the full range of questions that developers are asking us. So that's why we've kind of used it in-house to help consult on projects. So what you'll see if you go to Sandbox's website or mine, there's a link to the agrivoltaics modeling software. What you see is different than what we see. And what Thomas can do on his end is hone in on a specific plot of land. Okay, we're in Illinois. It pulls in a climate file. And that will inform not only the radiance that is received by the panels, but the ground level as well. So, okay, I'm in this location, and then we configure the array. Do you want a single axis tracker? Do you want vertical bifacial panels? How do you want the system to look? How far are we spacing the rows? All of that technical detail is built into the model. And then on the outside, on the output, we have a bankable energy estimate. We know how much the system is going to produce. And we also know the ground level irradiance in terms of photosynthetic photon flux density. And that's a fancy word, but what it means is you can take the PPFD, the photon flux density, and compare it to PPFD levels that crops need to thrive. So we're able to inform a suitable range of crops based on your location and based on the configuration of the array. So then we take that to a developer and help them work on a farm plan. This is what the system needs to look like to accommodate this level of production based on your location and based on maybe your limitations. Like, I have to achieve this level of power output. So we work within the parameters of the developer to deliver them a viable agrivoltaic application. And it's a heavy lift for three people, but we're just gaining traction. We're just getting started. And as I said, within a year from now, we want other people to access this. We don't want it to be all in-house. Like, we want developers using it like they use Helioscope or PV Watts. Like, go in and build your agrivoltaic system and then take that to your financer and take that to your farmer and get moving, because we need to make some strides here.
Yeah, it's very heady days with the IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act, right? We're at this confluence of events. Energy prices are going up. Technology prices are coming down. We have good federal and in many places state incentives for solar. Now some specific incentives for agrivoltaics and pollinator-friendly solar. We just need more and better tools to bring it all together to make it easier to go from concept to this is a, buildable, fundable design. Well, what kind of a reception are you getting from all of these constituents? One of our concerns as solar developers is, of course, NIMBYism, not in my backyard. There are places where there is pushback against even community solar. These are, here in the Midwest, 30-acre projects. But what all feedback are you getting from the various stakeholders around the country?
Well, from a developer perspective, they're really bumping up against that public opposition to solar on farmland. That's huge, and it's relatable. I mean, I walk up and down my street, and my neighbors are grazing cattle, and I think, man, like, how would a solar array look over the top of these fuzzy cows? I don't know if I'd enjoy that. It would erase the cultural heritage of the Keweenaw. So coming from an agrivoltaic expert to say that, like, I don't know if I'd want to see that in my backyard. Like, imagine others who have different backgrounds and different priorities and interests. So, but developers are saying if they can't deliver a project that speaks to the interests of rural communities, there's going to be increasing resistance to solar. My data speaks to that. Their experience speaks to that. And I like to think that the emerging research and the momentum building around Agrisolar and pointing the Agrisolar Clearinghouse, definitely we can take that momentum to the community level in those local conversations in the permitting process. We can elevate case studies and highlight how this is being leveraged for farm viability, not to convert farmland into energy production, but to inject economic opportunity into rural communities. So I think your question was around the stakeholder perception around this NIMBYism. And I actually conducted a study in which we surveyed rural landowners in both Houghton County, where I'm located, and Lubbock, Texas, based on our original research project. I was asking the same question, like, would you be more interested or supportive of solar if it incorporated an agricultural function? And I measured folks were 81% more likely to support solar if it were agrivoltaic dual use. And that's incredible. And that's at 2 counties across the entire US. And folks highlighted in my survey study, like, that benefits to farmers was the leading motivator for that attitude change. Like, they wanted to see solar benefit farmers, not take farmland out of production. So how you tell that narrative is important to community members, just like me. If you told me that my neighbor wanted solar over the tops of his cows, then I would like it. But if it was imposed, it'd be different. And that cultural heritage and that narrative around how solar goes on a farmland is so important.
Yeah, I mean, one of the phenomenon is that the landowner is absentee. You know, upwards of 50% of landowners in rural America are absentee. And so it's the neighbors that have to deal with the impact. And there are various impacts, right? We're talking about taking farmland potentially and converting it to, say, pollinator-friendly solar, which would be a bare minimum, really, in my opinion. Very, very great ecological benefits, right? You're going to get much greater water absorption on that land than you would have from industrial cropping. You're going to get more biodiversity. It's going to be more friendly to butterflies and birds and other insects. And of course, soil microorganisms and that microflora is going to be very invigorated by converting the land from ag to pollinator-friendly solar. But the stakeholders, the neighbors, they still see it as taking cropland out of cropping. And they don't have a good warm fuzzy about that, right? They already are feeling the pressure of development. And there's a myriad of types of development going on in rural America. There's pipelines, and there's power lines, and there's wind farms, and there's solar farms, and of course other industrial uses. But if we can make it easier, more practical for developers to say, yeah, we would love to do specialty cropping on this land, which is wonderfully, fertile ground, and it's just a question of making it pencil, right, for the farmer, making it easy to move their equipment around the array. And, you're talking several times in the course of a cycle, right, that you have to run a tractor, perhaps pulling other gear behind it in order to do this. And so there's a little bit of a disconnect. Solar construction isn't quite there, right out of the box. And that's why this R&D, we are in an R&D phase, and we need to lean into that and do more of that and figure out what works where and what types of construction methods are going to be favored. So I love it that you found that Yeah, landowners will more readily embrace solar if there is dual use. It makes sense, makes perfect sense. And now we just need more people to know about Agrisolar Consulting and the work that's going on in your sphere of influence. So what else are you working on? Who else would you like to hear from? Like, who do you want to hear from? Who's a good customer for you? Well, let's just go there.
Yeah. Well, thank you for all of that. You highlighted the Agrisolar Clearinghouse, and I'm happy you did because that's one of my favorite partners. I have the pleasure of working with Dr. Stacy Peterson. She's the Director of Energy Programs at the National Center for Appropriate Technology. And as you said, that's a DOE CETO-funded project. So I support the development of informational resources, currently working on the development of a policy matrix. We highlight case studies. We organize field trips and roundtables and webinars and really start to elevate the voices around agrivoltaics. And that's one of the projects that are near and dear to my heart. I highlighted American Farmland Trust. I also spoke about my work with SPADE. I didn't really speak to the work I'm doing with the Dr. Greg Barron Gafford group at the University of Arizona. So the USDA funded the USD NEPA grant and funded a project called SCAPES, which might be relevant to some listeners. SCAPES is an acronym for Sustainably Co-locating Agriculture and Photovoltaic Electricity Systems. This is like 3 to 4 universities have come together to advance agrivoltaics across the country. And I've been leading a national solar industry assessment there, really trying to understand what is challenging the diffusion of agrivoltaics in the US from a developer perspective. And so I'm like, looking at what drivers are pushing innovation, what levers we need to pull, what policy mechanisms are going to really expedite diffusion. And that's where I've been at the past couple of months, is like deep in the dirt of like policy mechanisms and stimulating diffusion from a developer's perspective. So I bring that lens coupled with the work I'm doing with the American Farmland Trust, bring it to the Agrisolar Clearinghouse, use it to answer developer questions through SPADE and my partnership with Sandbox Solar. And now I'm looking at the horizon of my growth and where I want to continue to go. And I want to see myself satisfying both types of demands for better social science research and greater direction in terms of policy for agrivoltaics. But I also want to have a hand in development. I want to see application. I don't want to just write manuscripts in my ivory tower. It's like, let's go out into communities. I want to come to community meetings where an agrivoltaic project is being discussed, or there's opposition to solar on farmland, and I'd love to present an alternative narrative in those communities. So I'd love to see myself working towards development and helping folks who are actually on the ground trying to build these projects make it happen. So it's hard to see. It's been so fluid, and I'm so receptive to everything that comes my way. So if you're listening and you're interested, please don't be shy. I'm growing. I want to build a team. So I don't want to continue to do this alone. So if you're an agrivoltaic expert and you don't have a job, please call me. I need help. We've got a huge mission and a lot of problems to solve, and the clock is ticking. So that's just my plug for I need help.
Excellent. Well, we'll let people know how to reach you. I want to encourage our listeners to check out all of our content at cleanpowerhour.com. Please give us a rating and a review on Apple and Spotify, and make comments on our YouTube channel and subscribe to our YouTube. This will all help others find this content, and we are growing the clean energy transition, one podcast at a time, one guest at a time, and we need tens and tens of thousands more people to get into the energy transition. So you can make a difference by liking and subscribing. So Alexis, how can people reach you? What is the best way? And we'll also put your info in the show notes.
Great. Thank you so much, Tim. This is such an honor and pleasure. Easy way is by going to agrisolarconsulting.com. And there I have both my phone number and email address. And I also have a portfolio where you can find all my publications. My email address is pasted on all of the publications as well. I respond to emails, phone calls. If you can find where I'm hiding in the forest, you can knock on my door, but I challenge that. Yeah, I would leave it at that.
Great. Well, I want to thank you, Alexis Pascaris, founding director of Agrisolar Consulting, for coming on the show. I'm Tim Montague. Let's grow solar and storage.
Thanks, Tim.